You're about to go on a journey. It's the same journey I went on while trying to unravel a terrifying mystery from the 80s. But this isn't like the Dollarstone messages where I had an entire book for reference. I had to painstakingly cobble together pieces of information from all over the place to try and make sense of this tale. These scraps were so few and far between that I didn't even think I could make a video out of this, let alone solve the entire thing. But that's what I did, and I hope you enjoy the ride. Starting here, Stockport, United Kingdom, early 1988. On the southern edge of Greater Manchester, Stockport was a gritty, industrious town with a long history in textile manufacture. You'd probably smell a mix of dye works and diesel in the air, with buses offering a primary form of transport for workers in the city. As you'd expect, a lot of the buildings dated back to the Victorian era, with many now used as commercial offices. It was in one of these offices, although we're not sure which, where a local architect firm was operating. Whilst many architects were still relying on paper files, this one had employed a line of Amstrad PC1512 machines, which also printed out documentation for customers. Amstrad's PC1512 was a budget-friendly IBM PC compatible. In fact, it was one of the first budget clones to hit the UK market, sporting an 8MHz Intel 8086, 512KB of RAM and enhanced CGA graphics.
It can even help a small business with its paperwork. The Amstrad PC1512 from £399 plus VAT. Amstrad, computers for every Tom, Dick and Harriet.
A clever design trick featured a power supply stowed inside the monitor, reducing costs and preventing the need for an internal fan in the main unit, although consumer expectations meant a fan was installed anyway for no real purpose. Fan aside, the machine itself was rather quiet. Other than a high-pitched coil whine and the subdued sound of air passing over components, you'd barely notice it was on, unless someone was typing on the keyboard. In a dark office, the internal hard drive light would offer a reassuring glow, especially in a dark winter's evening. It was on one of these evenings that office staff began to notice something strange about their machine, something you wouldn't expect from a computer even if you had the most basic of understandings. It was the office cleaner who first noticed something unusual. Whilst vacuuming, they happened to see an eerie glow was still coming from the screen. Her first thought was that someone had just left it on and gone home. However, after inspecting the power cord, it was found to not even be plugged in. The following week, staff then also started to notice other strange occurrences. At one point, the computer started up all by itself. It then started producing garbled messages on screen and even projected images without the benefit of software able to do so. It was even reported to produce groaning sounds like someone in pain, all while still giving off an eerie glow after hours, putting the cleaner on increasing amounts of edge, no doubt. Now, we can make all the jokes in the world about the fact that it's an Amstrad, so it's hardly surprising that it would be groaning in pain, but this computer caused enough fuss that it was featured in several newspapers at the time, and then subsequently featured at the Amstrad Computer Show held at Alexandra Palace in May of that year. Here's the thing. At this point, we're already a bit thin on the ground with details. We have enough to know that this haunting was reported, and we have enough to know that subsequent tests were run on the machine, but the outcome of those tests is a little shrouded in mystery. So, I'm going to look at this from an investigative point of view. I actually found this story earlier this year whilst getting down a rabbit hole regarding haunted computers in general. It was off the back of a story that patron of the show and fellow YouTuber WhatHoSnorkers sent me late last year. So let's begin there. Nosti, I've located a Christmas-inspired ghost story. Huh, what is it? It seemed like a bad dream. It became a sprite-mare. This ghost story, published in Home Computing Weekly's late December issue in 1983, was a curious one. A lonely user sees sprites rearranging themselves at night, first as faces, then glitches that watch him. But let's get back on track. The result of this is that I started searching for old computer ghost stories. As you might expect, one of the most prominent is the Doddleston messages, which I made a video on back in 2021. But nestled away on a site called techmonitor.ai, I found a story entitled Ghost in the Machine. It's only listed as being written by a CBR staff writer and has clearly been lifted from an article written on the 26th of May 1988. At least it lists the date, if not the source. It says, experts are said to be completely baffled by a haunted Amstrad PC 1512 personal computer, fast becoming the current Amstrad Computer Show's prize exhibit. Office staff at a firm of architects in Stockport eventually refused to work with the machine, which groaned and glowed and even switched itself on when completely unplugged from its wall socket. Finally, the company turned to the Amstrad PC magazine, fortuitously published in nearby Macclesfield, for help. The magazine's editor, Ken Hughes, rose to the challenge and monitored the ghostly machine's activities via a video camera for some 3 months. The tapes are currently on show beside their subject at the Amstrad exhibition. Ken Hughes is believed to be calling for an exorcist. So awesome is the machine's reputation that the psychic press invited to the Alexandra Palace based show are conspicuous by their absence. An exhibition spokeswoman said she could only assume that they were too frightened to attend. Since arriving in London, the machine has been relatively well behaved. Currently both the power switch and the disk drive lights are blazing away, but as yet, no groans have been reported. Some supernatural scoffers have dared to dismiss the whole affair as a calculated crowd-pulling exercise. We only hope they are not forced to recant once back at their screens. I also found it referenced on eclecteriumshuka.blogspot.com, this time a blog post written in January 2012 that actually covers the Doddleston messages and Ken Webster. Yeah, there must be something to do with Kens. Along with a tale about Maine's physicist Professor Ernst Senskowski capturing a ghost through TV static in 1986. If we scroll further down, we find a few short paragraphs of the Amstrad computer Stockton, you've been talking in your sleep again. This takes a slightly different angle, but is more or less the same. Do computers have nightmares or talk in their sleep? If so, this may explain the nocturnal activity of an Amstrad computer installed during 1987 in a Stockton architect's office. During working hours it behaved impeccably, but on many occasions at night, when only the cleaners were present, its screen abruptly began to glow. Meaningless sentences appeared on screen for about 30 seconds, and then just as abruptly they vanished, after which the computer gave out a loud groan and switched itself off. What makes all of this even more strange, however, is that it occurred even when the computer was unplugged. Ken Hughes, editor of Personal Computer, examined this maladjusted machine, but despite stripping it down and inspecting every component, he could find nothing unusual. Yet a video camera trained upon it for 3 months confirmed the authenticity of its evening's erratic outpourings. Ultimately, the mere presence of this eerie computer began to disturb some of its human workmates who lost no sleep, therefore, over the decision to remove it. Whether the computer subsequently continued to lose sleep, conversely, is another matter entirely. These articles are written in a somewhat tongue-in-cheek fashion, but that doesn't necessarily detract from their source, which we must ascertain. As you'll find out the deeper we go into this, researching a haunted 1980s computer means trawling through a lot of odd corners of the internet, newspaper archives, old forums, even scanned PDFs from 1988, and honestly, I'd have lost my mind trying to keep it all straight if it weren't for today's sponsor, Opera. Opera's made this whole investigation far easier. With tab islands, I can keep everything grouped, one island for Stockport leads, another for Amstrad hardware notes, and one for ghost stories. They expand, collapse, and actually make sense of the chaos. When I'm cross-checking articles, the split-screen feature lets me drag a tab down and see 2 pages at once, like having 2 monitors inside one window. Old newspaper on one side, my notes on the other. And if I'm 30 tabs deep, which is most days, tab traces give a subtle underline on the tabs I've just visited, so I can tell instantly where I came from, no more ghost hunting through the endless tabs. Even the interviews I watched stayed visible thanks to Opera's video pop-out. I can detach the video, float it anywhere, and keep reading the next lead without losing the clip. So, if you want the same setup I used to chase a haunted PC across the 80s, grab Opera at the link in the description. Thanks to Opera for keeping my tabs and my sanity organised. It can be difficult when tracing a story like this to know where to start. Unlike a more recent tale that may have a trail over the web, even maybe a defunct website on archive.org, everything before the mid-90s is either stored on a bulletin board system that's long been trashed, or more likely sitting in paper form or in the bin. Of course, there are thankfully digital records for a lot of this, and that's usually where I begin. I have numerous subscriptions to archived material, but newspapers.com is usually a good place to start. The problem, of course, is finding something relevant in the literally thousands of newspaper articles stored within. After various attempts on searches and filters, I got a hit on Haunted Computer for 1988. 2nd of June 1988 in the Stockport Express. The Stockport Express is a local paper now published every Wednesday, and the sister paper to the Stockport Times. As of 2023, it reportedly had a circulation of just over 1,300. The article leads page 5 with the headline "Mystery of a Haunted Computer." With further context, workers became so frightened they downed tools. And it's here where we get a lot of the meat for the story, hidden amongst the local paper quips and alliteration. Here then, we get reports of the cleaner first seeing the hauntings, we get a list of supernatural occurrings, and we get more information about the show mentioned earlier. The picture here is of Ken Hughes, the editor of Amstrad PC, the official Amstrad PC magazine, alongside the machine in question. At least I think that's the magazine which we're referencing. Although that's not a PC 1512 he's pointing at, the 1512 is next to it. That looks like a separate unit running the VHS tape or recording. This article references Ken as being the editor of leading computer magazine PCA, so presumably PC Amstrad or Amstrad PC, and details the testing he has been charged with. It's being unveiled as the current show in London billed as the world's first haunted computer. It has already undergone 3 months exhaustive testing by computer experts and is now being thrown open to scrutiny by specialists at the Amstrad Computer Show at Alexandra Palace. A remote video camera equipped with a soundtrack has been trained on the computer night and day for the last 2 months. Before the experiment, Ken checked the machine was not overcharged with power and ensured it was out of range of radar systems. But just like the overactive Amstrad, the researchers were left without lead. It goes on to state that they witnessed the machine turning itself on and the screen lighting up while it was unplugged, and saw random letters regularly flashing up. Ken and his team finally had to admit defeat, and he commented, "We are completely baffled." That's why we have arranged to take the machine and the evidence along to the show. Let's hope there are other experts who can explain what's happening. If they can't, all we can do is hand over our data to a psychic research organisation. The only course left after that would be to call in an exorcist. This news story raises some important lines of inquiry. The first is whether there are any reports from the Amstrad Computer Show or even some footage of this computer in the flesh. The second and most tantalising is, does footage of this computer being filmed over those months exist? Somewhere. Anywhere. Surely it must. Let's start with the Amstrad Computer Show hosted in May 1988 at Alexandra Palace, London. Now, what would be great is some footage of that event. Sadly, not being a significant event and it being in 1988, there doesn't appear to be anything uploaded on the web. But we can fall back onto press reports. The best place, of course, would be the official Amstrad PC magazine edited by Ken Hughes himself, which I believe was published by Database Publishing Limited in the Greater Manchester area. However, this is a lot harder to find than most computer magazines. To understand why, we need to understand the landscape of computer magazines at that time, especially in the UK. In the 80s alone, we were awash with Amstrad magazines. We have Amstrad Action, Amstrad Computer User, Computing with the Amstrad, Amstrad CPC User Club, CPC Computing, CPC Attack, the Amstrad User, Amtix, Amstrad PC, Amstrad PCW, Amstrad PCW Plus, Amstrad PCW 8000 Plus, PCW Today, Your Amstrad PCW, PCW User, and Amstrad Professional Computing, to name a few. And that's not even including the multi-format magazines. They were everywhere, and the less popular business-orientated ones were usually chucked straight into the bin after reading. Copies of the magazine, which I think were edited by Ken Hughes based on its reported title, do exist, but they're few and far between. Also, copies of Amstrad PCW, confusingly another official title about a slightly different machine, also exist and may be useful, but we specifically need to find copies between May and October 1988. Although the show was in late May, it would sometimes take several months before a report was published in magazines. eBay is the first stop, and although there is an odd copy of both Amstrad PC Magazine and Amstrad PCW Magazine, there's nothing in the time period we're looking for. There are so many competing titles with similar names, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Obviously eBay is a great place to start, but a deep search of the web for scanned magazines is essential. There are many, but archive.org is a good starting point. But even that doesn't appear to have what we're looking for. It's got a French Amstrad PC magazine with the same name, but it's not the same publication. The one which Ken worked for is obviously going to be more likely to contain that feature. I did find a thread on cpcwiki.eu where folks have been scanning various magazines. Jevi Kak has posted a link to habisoft.com/pcwiki that does actually have a link to Amstrad PCW magazine, seemingly published by Avrolite Limited. It's not the same company, but they do seem to cover the era we need. However, the links to the actual magazines don't work, so I popped an email over to the site administrator to see if they are available anywhere at all. Remember, at this moment this is speculative. I don't know if any of these magazines have what we're looking for, and the main candidate, Amstrad PC magazine, is nowhere to be found on the web, archived or not. So, I decided to reach out to Adrian at the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge. He's a lovely guy, and he's been working at the museum for years. Although the museum only lists one Amstrad PC magazine in its archive online, it's always worth checking to see if they have any more. Whilst I wait for that, there are other places we can go. As I was looking for more magazine leads, I stumbled across a potential lead with Alexandra Palace itself. This is part of their collections archive, and it references the Computer Shopper show. Now this is actually the show that replaced both the Atari and the Amstrad shows in 1989, but the site also yields an entire section for the Amstrad computer show itself. Now, we don't know what's in this apparent file. The site doesn't show you, but you can arrange an appointment to the collection, so that's what I reached out to do. I got in contact with Kirsten Forrest, the curatorial and interpretation manager for the Ali Pali collection, and although her initial response noted that the references on file haven't returned an immediate result, she was happy to search for them. Okay, so we have another potential lead. Maybe somewhere in there there's a reference or photo or maybe even video, if we're lucky, of the Amstrad PC1512 in use. You never know. Okay, so while I wait for Ali Pali to also get back to me, it made sense to pore over as many Amstrad magazines as I could find. I did find a few references to the show. This is Amstrad Action, and I think it's important to make a distinction between the magazine types here. Amstrad Action was very much centered around the Amstrad CPC range of computers. These were home computers mainly used for gaming. Other magazines, like the ones with PCW in the title, were aimed at business users using Amstrad's range of PC compatibles or PC word processors as a budget line of machines that did their own thing, and they had built-in, word processors and the like. The Amstrad Computer Show catered for both, but magazines like Amstrad Action will take a slant towards gaming and entertainment and may veer away from the business or business magazine related stands. In issue 32, dated May 1988, the main reference is this single-page advert. More stands, more space, more savings. You can see the date of the show running from Thursday the 26th of May to Saturday the 28th of May 1988. Now, Alexandra Palace is a fairly moderate-sized space. I went there a few years ago for a vegan food festival, so there would have been quite a lot there. Future Publishing's Amstrad Action were in attendance, but it wasn't until their August issue, 35, that they reported on the show, which apparently was a disappointment. Exhibitors at the latest Amstrad show held at Alexandra Palace in London pronounced the event a flop. The absence of buzz, so much a feature of previous shows, was the topic of much conversation, both among the exhibitors and the visitors. Its noted attendance was around 12,000, fewer than the 20,000 expected. However, there is absolutely no mention of the haunted PC 1512, and that's likely because it was technically being hosted by a rival magazine. So let's go back to the drawing board. If we're going to find anything, then Ken Hughes is clearly our man. He's the editor of the magazine we're looking for. He's the one who ran the experiments, appeared in the newspapers, and out of everyone, he's the most likely candidate to have those apparent recorded tapes, if they even still exist. Unfortunately, Ken Hughes isn't exactly a unique name, especially in the UK, and my usual first port of call, LinkedIn, yields no success. LinkedIn is usually useful because it lists prior jobs, and a large portion of its demographic are somewhat older than typical social media. Before we fall back onto other, less pleasant social media platforms, let's see what we can find in and around the web. It might give us some direction as to where he went afterwards, or even where he is now. The first hit is from Scribed. Ed Irvin has uploaded an Atari user magazine from August 1988. Interesting, that's the right period we're looking for, and it lists Ken Hughes as the features editor. I suspect that is indeed the same Ken Hughes, but as you may expect, there is no mention of his experiment in this Atari-dominated magazine. We do have a hit from Maplin Electronics magazine from December 1995. It's a letter from a Ken Hughes offering a correction to a prior letter about an Amstrad 8256 to IBM disk converter. Surely, that's got to be the same guy. It lists his address as Wokingham, Berkshire. Okay, so now we have a potentially slightly updated, more accurate possible location, albeit one but still 30 years old. One thing that did catch my attention was this Quora reference. Ken Hughes, urban fantasy writer, Amstrad console back in the 80s. Could this be him? Does he have a Quora profile? That would make things much easier. But sadly no, this isn't the Ken we're looking for. It's a classic case of Google literally reading between the lines and combining results from a single page. There is a reference from an 8000 Plus magazine which kind of confirms Ken was also working on that. It makes sense, folks tended to work across multiple magazines then and now, but it's important because maybe, just maybe, a copy of 8000 Plus from 88 might reference the computer in question. Does it warrant buying an entire collection of the magazine from eBay? For the right price, yes it does. There's another Scribed reference. This is just an extract from the Mammoth Book of True Hauntings, referencing a news story from the People newspaper. If anyone was going to cover this, the People would be it. A true British tabloid filled with crap. There's not really a lot to find on the guy, to be honest, but I did try searching Google's Usenet archive and, an entry talking about computer magazines where a Ken Hughes writes, "I have now returned to the world of true journalism, local newspapers. We also have an email address, although ken@kenhughes.prestel.co.uk is sadly long dead. But we now know that at least from 1997, Ken was working for his local newspaper. Interesting. But what local paper? Well, the usual routes gave me no joy, but the British newspaper archive had many pieces by A. Ken Hughes, all written between 94 and 96 for the Burnley Express in Lancashire. That's not a far hop from the Greater Manchester area where the original magazine was published, and so kinda aligns, but it does throw that Berkshire address into doubt, although I guess you could write articles from anywhere, even for a local newspaper. So we may be getting a picture of where Ken went, but we don't have anything present day. So that means falling back onto those other social media platforms. Now from this press photo, Ken looked to be probably in his late 40s, early 50s. Remember, everyone looked older in the 80s. So if he's around today, he's likely to be in his 80s. If, being key, he may well have passed away. So before searching those, I did a quick search on funeral notices from 1997 onwards, and there are quite a few Ken Hughes. But funeralnotices.co.uk does have a couple of Ken Hughes in the Greater Manchester area. One died in 2022 at age 74, the other on January the 12th, 2013 at age 81. Either of those might work for him, but they are at either end of the scale, and there's nothing that ties them back conclusively. If he is still alive, Ken may have nothing to do with the computing scene these days, so looking for him falls mainly on looking for people who look around 80 And although I was going to just search for Greater Manchester area where the magazine was published, we now have the Wokingham, Berkshire, situated just west of London, as a potential candidate as well. Sadly, neither of these yielded any surviving contenders that I could find. There are plenty of Ken Hughes online, but none of them are Ken Hughes, and you'd think if he were still alive with his background, he'd at least be online somewhere. I decided to ask around some Amstrad groups and forums to see if anyone knew Ken, and whilst that simmered, I followed up on the Alexandra Palace archive situation. This place is iconic, impressive and imposing. The lovely Kirsten had to take some time away from work, but as soon as she was back in, she invited me down to take a look in the archives of this wondrous place. I know I should stay on track, but this place is really cool. Kirsten's background is in museums, so in the East Court she has set up a constantly evolving exhibition depicting the palace's iconic role in television history. However, behind the scenes, things become a lot more mysterious and unnerving. In the back corridors and lower basements of this old building lies all manner of historical artifacts. There's a block of wall seemingly made from bottle shards which no one can understand, and dotted around here there are clues to the history both inside and outside of this magnificent temple. Up there is where the Ali Pali archive all started. It's where the original files were once forgotten, found and then retrieved. Because of these efforts, in more serviceable parts of the building, we now have access to the catalogued archive, and Kirsten has located the file containing details on the May 1988 Amstrad show. So, let's have a peek inside. What we find is a treasure trove of correspondence, pricing guides, confirmation letters, financial documents, and show information. These are documents that haven't seen the light of day since the late 80s, and my job is now try and find out something, anything useful within.
Oh, look at that furniture. That's look at this. Such 80s elegance.
What was the name of the person you said?
So Ken Hughes, he's the guy who would have been running the stand, and he was part of the magazine, part of database exhibitions, I presume, as well.
It's all Peter Brameld and Christine Lees, as far as I can see.
These might be good lines of inquiry, because I haven't found Ken Hughes online, but maybe if we can find these people on LinkedIn or something.
Sadly, there's no reference to Ken Hughes or the haunted computer. The name which does keep popping up again and again is Peter Brameld, who seems to have been the marketing director for Database Exhibitions, which looks like it's tied to Database Publications Limited, the magazine Ken Hughes wrote for. What's more, we have a letter here to Derek Meakin, the managing director of Database Publications, whose office is actually located in Stockport. What are the chances? Other than that, there's a floor plan of the event along with a guide covering off the details of the show. So here's what we know. Shortly before this Amstrad show, a haunted Amstrad computer happened to appear in the same town as a company linked closely to the show creators. This computer appeared in the press promoting the show and the magazine before it was then taken to the show for the entire exhibition. Have we perhaps not stumbled across a haunted computer at all, but a 1988 marketing gimmick? It's certainly possible. My first port of call is to follow up on these leads. It turns out that Derek Meakin sadly passed away about 10 years ago, but he was the chap who founded database publishing as well as database exhibitions and database software that published titles such as MiniOffice 2. Database publishing would go on to become Europress, a publishing name that you're probably more familiar with and one who would be sold to IDG Media in 1994. I did actually manage to locate Peter Brameld on LinkedIn and sent him a message along with an email to someone who apparently had his contact details some 6 years ago after he emailed regarding a blog post about one of Database Publishing's titles, Windfall magazine, sharing a story about the early days of the company, which is fascinating in itself. I can only hope I hear back. Because if this whole thing was indeed a marketing gimmick, I'm sure someone would be happy to blow the lid on it now. Enough time has passed, no one is going to care. But here's the thing, if it was a gimmick, the amount of coverage it received doesn't seem to be very high, but it could have been a marketing misfire. So what I really want to check are more Amstrad magazines from the time to see if it made a bigger impact. Handily, Adrian from the Centre for Computing History has got back to me and confirmed they have various Amstrad magazines from that era in the archive. So, let's leave London and head to Cambridge. I arrive at the Centre for Computing History on a rather drab Wednesday afternoon. At this time of year, the museum closes at 3 PM, so I've not got much time to go through the magazines, which Adrian has found more of than I was expecting.
Oh, Mag 106.
106, yes.
June 80. Oh, okay.
Oh, November 88, here you go.
That's interesting. So this is potential. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a plethora of magazines here covering the period of May 1988 to November 88. We're most likely to see coverage of the convention in the August to September issues, so that's where I'm focusing. We've got Amstrad Computer User, Computing with the Amstrad and Amstrad Professional Computing, which looks like it then became Amstrad PC. Now that's the magazine I thought I was looking for, but it turns out it isn't. Amstrad Computer User and Amstrad PC are actually both published by Avrolite Limited, not Database Publications. They also contain no reference to the Ali Pali Amstrad show other than the adverts we've seen in the other magazines. However, Computing with the Amstrad is a database publication. It's a magazine that was published up until August 1988, which is the right ballpark. However, it focuses on the Amstrad CPC range of home computers rather than the PC series. Again, it has no real reference to the Ali Pali show other than adverts leading up to it. So this, sadly, is a dead end. Okay, so I'm back at Nerd Headquarters. So remember those PCW magazines I won on eBay? Well, they've arrived, so let's see if they can shed any further light. It turns out that these are published by the mighty Future Publishing, and again I can't find any reference to the show or the haunted computer other than those adverts. My heart did stop for a second seeing this news piece, but it's sadly nothing to do with what we're looking for. I then received an email back from Judith Wilding about Peter Brameld's email address. This is exciting. She noted that he was 75 when they last spoke in 2019 and suffering from ill health, but from searching he appears to still be active online in some places. I sent an email and waited. Later that evening, I received an email back. Good evening, Peter. I am intrigued as to what investigations you're pursuing regarding database publishing and the other associated company database exhibitions, both of which I was active in a senior management role. I was Editor-in-Chief of Database Publications and Managing Director of Database Exhibitions. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you would like to talk to me, either by Zoom, telephone or email. Please bear in mind that I'm now over 80 years old and not quite as fast as I used to be. I wish you all the best with your endeavours, and I'm happy to be of assistance in a way that I can be. Kind regards, Peter. Okay, this is the strongest lead we've had so far. I replied to Peter, I outlined what I was hoping to discover, and again, I waited. And I continued to wait. I have Peter's phone number, but I don't want to hassle the man, so I'll give him time to get back to me. And whilst I waited, through a random search, I actually stumbled across a magazine in the Centre for Computing History's online archive that might actually be the one I'm looking for. Strange that it didn't come up earlier. Personal Computing with the Amstrad PC, and it's by Database Publications. Could this be Ken Hughes' magazine? Best I find out.
Carefully preserved a little bit of that male DNA.
It's another drab Wednesday afternoon and I'm back at the Centre for Computing History to see if that magazine is useful at all.
Excitingly, they didn't just have that one magazine, they have all the magazines from April 1988 to November 88, exactly the right time period. What's more, a quick inspection inside the front cover confirms this is the one. There's Ken Hughes listed as the features editor, the same as he was for Atari User. The April magazine includes a write-up on the Amstrad Alexandra Palace show held in February. Yes, apparently they were that popular, they were held several times a year. It also notes how popular that particular show was, exceeding expectations. But then, nothing about the May show at all, apart from those damn adverts. And a single news segment leading up to it stating that it's tipped to break the record, which it did not. After that, no write-up, no mention in the news, nothing. Perhaps, as Amstrad Action reported, the fact it didn't do well led Database to sweep it under the rug. In fact, that was the last Amstrad show held at Alexandra Palace. But it's strange, even though Ken, as the features editor, has written various features for each magazine, some pretty interesting, there is no feature about the haunted PC either before or after the show. Now, Personal Computing with the Amstrad PC is quite a serious publication, so maybe it just didn't fit the mould. So then why the hell did Ken spend months recording this PC? Why was he in the paper but not his own magazine with it? Was it just a side project? Why was it at the show but not publicised anywhere else than seemingly the local news and a few syndicated stories around the globe? It's very odd. It seems that Ken's tenure as features editor lasted from the start of 1988 to April 1990, so about 2 years, before he moved on to Pastures New, which aligns with his writing at local newspapers. But it's strange. All this is strange. I go home and try to make sense of these shreds of information. As I tried to make sense of this information, I searched online, and as I searched online, I found a magazine I had missed. A magazine I hadn't even considered to be a candidate. The Games Machine, issue 9, August 1988. On page 98 is a feature called The Ghost in the Machine, and it doesn't just talk about the haunted Stockport Amstrad, it also talks about the Dodleston Messages machine and, apparently, an entirely different haunted Amstrad. Good lord, how deep does this mug's eyeful go? The other Amstrad story involves an accountant by the name of David Dawson, whose haunting began in 1984 after moving to the village of Dunley, Worcestershire. Things started going amiss in and around their house, and so they jokingly named their apparent ghost Norman. However, when their new Amstrad PC W8256 arrived from Dixon's, it began printing randomly by itself, and this is what it printed. Now, I cannot speak to thee. My name is not Norman, but Catherine de Wish. You will see me often, but I will not hurt thee. Please do not offend me. I mean no harm to thee or anyone living. My life was short, but happy on this spot, although my home was a house before this one. Wait a minute, this sounds like the Dodleston messages all over again, but with an Amstrad. Okay, so now we have a prior haunted Amstrad computer. We can look into that another time. However, the magazine goes on to discuss the Stockport PC 1512, apparently off the back of a Daily Mail story in May 1988. The Daily Mail story had come from a press release sent out by the magazine in Macclesfield, Cheshire, which claimed it had been approached in January by the unnamed architects with a plea for help. Features editor Ken Hughes was well used to handling readers' problems and took to the phone with a sense of deja vu. I thought they had a problem running software. The cleaner was refusing to clean, so Hughes lugged the Amstrad to a little used photo studio upstairs, unplugged it and set a video camera running in front of it. For a month, nothing. Then at the beginning of March it happened all at once, says Hughes. There's a sequence on the video. You can see the mains lead quite clearly rolled up with the plug showing. The power light comes up and then it goes through its boot up. After 5 or 6 seconds or so, the power goes off. The keyboard was disconnected and Hughes had even removed the batteries used to keep the PC's clock and calendar running. Apparently it then happened again. It happens about 11:15 at night. You can see characters flashing across the screen randomly. This time there was no power light. The flickering letters came and went too quickly to read, but unlike the words on David Dawson's screen, they appeared to be ordinary characters. It goes on to state that now the Amstrad Computer Show was approaching and Hughes saw the opportunity for a press release. It stated that Manfred Casseret, working for the Society of Psychical Research, attended the show and since that point had been trying to get hold of a tape from Hughes, who had promised to send it. Casseret was a well-known parapsychologist but sadly passed in December 2003. The fact that this feature notes that the tale made it into both the Daily Mail and the News of the World, quite big tabloids in the UK, suggests then that actually this whole affair had been much more publicised than I thought. Interesting. The author of this article, Barnaby Page, shares his thoughts. It stinks of a stunt, yet if any of what database publications claims about the case is true, the Amstrad which came to inexplicable life one near-deserted night could give researchers their first haunted computer. So, this then is the most complete version of the event that I've heard or seen. But most complete doesn't necessarily mean true. Two days later, I wake up to an email. Good morning, Peter. Sorry I haven't got back to you as I promised. Things just seem to crop up, particularly if you have a wife who is 20 years younger than you are. Please feel free to give me a ring anytime today. Kind regards, Peter. This was a Friday and I'd already arranged to meet Steve Jones of Checkmate Amiga fame that day. So we do some filming, grab lunch at Giggling Squid, and he departs just before 5. I immediately phone Peter Brameld straight after, keen to find out what he knows.
Mr. Brameld.
Hi Peter, it's Peter Lee here calling. I've been talking to
Hello,
you.
Peter.
How you doing?
Hi. Yes. Hello.
Is now a good time to talk quickly?
Not really. No, I'm about to have my tea.
Oh, okay.
Give me a time tomorrow if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
But anyway, no, I look forward to talking to you. I can give you quite a lot of background in terms of the computer. The computer was I can't remember the exact numbers of Amstrads, but it was 440 or began with a 4. It was one of the early ones. Right. Because it had to have some history before it could get haunted. Okay. The person responsible for the actual story was an ex-Fleet Street journalist called Mike Cowley, C-O-W-L-E-Y. You might want to look him up on the internet, Mike Cowley. He had a company called Cowley Associates.
Right, okay.
He was absolutely brilliant in coming up with fictitious stories, but newsworthy stories that Fleet Street bit on, so that we actually got the promotion. The history behind that particular Amstrad show is quite interesting. Look forward to talking to you.
Okay, speak to you soon. Thanks.
All the best. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, okay. So that was just a preliminary call, but that's Peter Brameld informing me that it was actually a fictitious story made up by Mike Cowley of Cowley Associates. So, good. That's we've made some progress. Cool. Okay. I'll talk to him tomorrow. That's going to be an interesting conversation, I think.
From that short conversation alone, I can tell that Peter is a down-to-earth, genuine guy. But wow, to hear that it was a marketing gimmick straight up, I wasn't expecting that. And I don't mean I expected this to be a real haunting, I just didn't expect him to remember it straight off the bat like that. Remember, this was nearly 40 years ago. That evening I prepare a list of questions, and the next day I phone him at 2 PM to go through them.
Hello, Peter.
Hi, Peter. How you doing?
Yes, okay, thanks. Yeah.
So this PC, this haunted computer, it was a marketing gimmick. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. I mean, we had quite a few of them. There was one where they were saying that playing computer games was bad for a child, and so we had a set up with a child playing computer games under the supervision of a rather dodgy doctor.
Right.
And I was on Channel 4, extolling the virtues of computer games being harmless.
Yeah.
I mean, we always tried to have, some were more successful than others. The Haunted Computer was probably about one of the most successful ones going.
Along with some interesting marketing tales, Peter also helps clear up one thing which felt a bit strange to me. The fact that there was reportedly an Amstrad computer show in February 88 and May 88, both at Alexandra Palace.
Well, it had burned down, and then we published the dates for the show, and then we had to cancel the dates because, believe it or not, their fire alarm wouldn't work.
Oh, God.
And they weren't allowed to have public in the building until they got a working fire alarm, which, given the history, was reasonable enough. So the show was published once, and then we had to publicise it again six weeks or so later, which was why we were keen to have a gimmick.
Initially I thought this meant the May show was actually the replacement date for the February show, but the February show also went ahead. We know this because of the various post-show reports in various magazines. It turns out that after the 1980 fire, which destroyed most of the building, Alexandra Palace's Great Hall was due to reopen in January 88, with a later grand public opening in March. Up until that point, exhibitions, including the launch of a Sinclair C5, were held at a temporary Alexandra pavilion. From what I understand, the 9th Amstrad show was one of the first booked for its reopening. However, issues with the fire system meant that the show had to be pushed a month later into February. You can see the new date references in this advert. That show reportedly did well, but with the May show also booked in and now only a few months later and at the same venue, Database wanted to push it hard, and so the haunted computer idea was thrown into the mix in an attempt to create something enticing for punters to look at. And according to Peter, it was successful.
This marketing gimmick, this computer ghost and the other ones you did, were they successful? Did people actually come to the show based on that to see these machines?
Yes, it was. I mean, I was sort of a bit above the actual, dealing that idea. And to be quite honest, because I knew it was a scam, I tried to distance myself from it, because I was trying to put my foot in it, to be honest, because I didn't know the true story behind it.
Yeah.
But it was Mike Cowley and Ken who ran that, and it was focused. It was featured in some national papers and things like that. But I mean, again, we were, the show was devastatingly successful. I mean, it was really, well, it was very successful. But Ken was moved about really. He was not a brilliant computer boffin, but he was good working with Mike Cowley, writing press releases and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because he's the one who was in the press with the haunted computer talking about it. And apparently he filmed like 3 months of videotapes on the computer to try and capture ghost activity. But I presume that was just, part of the story, part of the fabrication.
Yes. There was no foundation in that at all. No, not at all. I mean, so I'm sorry to burst that.
No, it's fine. I would get to the bottom of it.
Peter has a lot of stories and information on the show and the magazine as a whole, and I absolutely plan on revisiting some of it for a future video. It's a fascinating insight into the 1980s world of computer exhibitions. Sadly, he's lost touch with Ken and a lot of people from that era, so that doesn't help us track him down. But even without Ken, we now understand exactly what happened. Honestly, I didn't expect this episode to end like this. I had an entire section planned out where we inspect the Amstrad PC, check whether it is indeed capable of making weird sounds, where we look at error reports from magazines and try to find any similar goings-on that could be explained rationally, and even where we take a look at other reportedly possessed objects over the years to see if anything aligns. But none of that is now necessary, because it turns out that this story didn't start in the offices of a Stockport architect as reported. It started in the offices of Mike Cowley Associates, who were also based in Greater Manchester and provided marketing services for the various database companies. I did try to track down Mike to discover why he decided on a haunted computer idea, but sadly couldn't reach him. But there had already been an entire book written about a haunted, time-travelling computer at that point already. I covered it in the Doddleston Messages video, so perhaps he simply sought inspiration from there. Either way, this has been a long and wild ride. What started as a quirky Halloween video led me to places and basements I absolutely did not expect. Remind me to start next year's Halloween video a bit earlier. I hope at least you enjoyed the journey.
Until next time, I've been Nostalgia Nerd. Toodaloo.